Hi, I'm Patrick Giguere with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology, and welcome to this episode. So I'm joined again by my friend Terrence Walker. Very happy to have him on here. And we're going to talk about some kind of hidden American history and lesser known American history. We get basically one version from all the institutions of so-called higher learning and all the publishing houses, and they've got their stories straight, and a debate about what happened and who was involved and when did it happen even is very narrow. So we want to open that up and get some more ideas. So thanks for coming, Terrence. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about this.
For sure.
So yeah, let's jump into this here. So we kind of got a little agenda we're working off here, but we'll see where it goes. So, one thing about America that they tell us is that up until the 1600s, or, in the case of the Spanish, maybe like the 1500s, everybody in America, it was just, one ethnic group of people or one race of people, and they're all living in Stone Age conditions. What do you think about that, Terrence?
Yeah, I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that at all for
Rhetorical question.
Yeah. No, I feel you. It's just funny. I mean, because once you actually get introduced to the truth, it really is mind blowing that it can be kept from you for so long and it's not taught. Especially going into the Americas prior to the 1492 Columbus era. Like we still see a lot of evidence around us, but a lot of times we're not aware of that preceded, the government that was here now. A lot of things as far as like the richness of the land and the people that were here and what they were capable of is pretty incredible. So I've had a chance to kind of dabble, but I would like to get, more into it along the subject line of a lot of the things that were happening here prior to 1492. And getting into Tartaria, Grand Tartaria, the whole thing about the Far East,
Yeah. And there are all these maps.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like North America and like the Asian landmass are part of this.
Exactly.
Grand Tartaria you're talking about. So
exactly. So then that kind of like makes me think about the indigenous of this landmass, and as time went on and things changed as far as like the landscape, because like a lot of these tribes were nomadic tribes, so they kind of like moved about. I've been able to find some things that related to Genghis Khan, which was kind of interesting to me because it was like, okay, far as like some of the beliefs that some of the indigenous, I guess you would say, in this part of the world that done a good job of preserving, their way of life and the way they do things. And you look at some of the Mongolian tribes, and things like that, you can see the connection to the land, what they believed in, so for a lot of different reasons, no, I do not believe that the people here were in the Stone Age prior to 1492. I don't believe that at all. I think it probably was like a reset at that point in time, especially when we talk about some of the ancient technology that they were using, because of the connection they had with the land, so I believe, the Americas is a very mystical place, and I continue to learn a lot of different things in regard to what's always been there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some really amazing things. I mean, I grew up in the Northeast, and there's some anomalies up there. Like, you ever heard of the Newport Tower?
I believe so vaguely. I think a friend told me about this tower.
Let me pull that up. Um, so, the Templars were famous for that round tower design.
Okay, now we're
You know,
talking.
as
Yes.
we're told, like, not a lot of people were building that before them.
Hmm.
So when the like Roger Williams and the English people who like settled Rhode Island in the
Hmm.
1600s, they get to Newport, Rhode Island, and this thing is there.
Oh wow. Okay. Yes.
So they wrote it down. They're like, we pulled in and this thing was there. And they did different things with it. They converted it into like a mill at different points, but
But it was already there.
it was already there. Yeah. And then there's another one. Let me see. Have you ever heard of Norumbega?
Norumbega. I'm not sure I have heard of Norumbega.
So there was a guy in New England um, back in the 1800s, and he said there was a civilization in like Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire,
Hmm.
maybe even stretching farther south, called Norumbega.
Okay.
And where the hell? Okay, Norumbega Tower. Here we go. Let me pull the full view up. Well, that was a pretty anticlimactic full view. Let me try that again.
Ah, it's all good.
Um, so yeah, he said there was a civilization called Norumbega in that area, and it was he thought Norumbega was like a corruption of like Norvega, so basically like Norway.
Okay, got you.
Um, you know, and I'm not sure exactly what he found, but I think he was citing different. Yeah. So this is what was on this guy's land. He says it was there when he bought it.
Wow.
Um, Critics of the theory say that he built this. He just like threw this up in the 1800s and tried to build a hoax around it. A lot of work.
Nah, nah, I don't think so. I don't think it's a hoax.
That's pretty
Like it
old.
was I don't know, like this from the way it's built, like it was a piece of something else, especially when
Yeah.
you get into the whole thing about the Nephilim, like they would have been kind of like, the last with these big, huge structures, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially a lot of the ones we see in the Americas and some of the, well, I don't know if you call them mountains. I'm not sure the technical term of pyramids, but the mountains or pyramids that are up and down along the Mississippi.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Like I don't know if they call them mounds or pyramids or
yeah,
yeah.
and so that kind of reminds me of the whole thing with Ireland.
Yeah.
And then you see the kind of structure that those stone type structures or whatever.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think that it was used for something else because we know that you can use sound for vibration, you know.
Yep.
If the stones are kind of like placed a certain type of way or whatever, then you can move things or transport things or whatever the case may be. So yeah, so like I said, like it's a lot's been going on that they've tried to kind of like downplay.
Big time. Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing too that so it's like some of the like the red indigenous people
Hmm.
in the Americas, they talked about meeting people who used, Celtic cross. So
Hmm. Hmm.
people
Okay.
aren't familiar with that.
Hmm.
It's this cross with the circle, right?
Yep.
That's probably a real good example. So what they said was they knew about these people, and they
Hmm.
said, if you meet these people, they're really cool. Like you're gonna have a good time with them. They're like, now if you meet people that have the cross and no circle, they're like, you're fucked. Like
Yeah. Okay. That was a
they're
good way
gonna
to
bring you.
explain it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a very good way to explain it. Signs and symbols. And
Yeah.
hmm. Yeah, so okay, the people that were here of this land, it's been so many different people
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
have occupied this landmass. I'm not even sure if we can find it anymore, but I was looking for a map that I saw. I have it. I'll just have to like send it to you through the app or whatever. It's called the MS-13. Um, Sometimes it's hard to find it or whatever, but it's called the MS-13. And this map actually has, as far as like the landmass of the Americas, it says like land of Prester, and then you got La Florida down there. So
Hmm.
showing certain aspects of how Europe thought after they had a couple chances to come here, I guess, or whatever, previous to the voyages or the exploration of like what was going on here. And like I was saying before, that name Prester. So I know the legends of Prester John, and then there's some actual context to back up some of these things or whatever. Like Prester is a priest, and
Sure.
John
Hmm.
or Juan is a priest king. So then we get back into the whole Hebrew piece, and then thinking about some of the stuff about Tartaria, and then just the nomadic tribes and some of the things that we kind of see in religious texts with David, how he had his own army
Right.
and he kind of traveled a certain way. Um, you know, it gives you the opportunity to kind of like, freely explore outside of the parameters that were given to us, as far as like, oh, these people this way, this thing just like this. Where if we look at some of the similarities in the cultures, it brings us into a better space of being able to see things a certain way, especially with, a lot of indigenous folks having a certain way of life about them, and
Yeah.
I think through a lot of the writings, because writings or language is usually associated with culture, on a lot of different levels. So like the Hebrew carvings that they found here, and then Hebrew being Aramaic, and then how ancient, some of the Aramaic writings are, and just, some of those kind of
Yeah.
things. I think it makes it a little easier to kind of like discover some of the hijack, meaning like what they took over and wanted us to know versus what was actually going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Oh yeah, so I just searched like Tartarian costume, like
Yeah,
Tartarian dress.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's interesting when you mentioned Prester John. So it's like the first place I encountered that was in there were like some Grail romances that were written like in medieval France.
Uh-huh.
So Prester, it's close to the French like prêtre, which means
Uh-huh.
priest.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then there's you ever read Percival? It was like one of the like the early ones. It's like a Grail
Mm-mm.
story.
Mm-mm.
That was one of the ones that really like put the whole Grail legend down and like
Okay, got you.
like it was
Got
written
you.
in like maybe the 1200s.
Mm-hmm.
So there's basically and it's very Masonic. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's this knight and he's a big hero, but he gets killed in a duel. And then
Mm-hmm.
his boy, his son is like the son of a widow, and he's raised out in the forest by this widow, and his mother doesn't want him to know who his father was, and he finds out, and he wants to become a knight.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes through this whole adventure of mastering himself and finding the Grail. And then
Mm-hmm.
towards the end, he gets introduced to this brother,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like someone I can't remember who tells him. He goes, "Oh, by the way, when your father was off in the east, he had a son with this queen, and
Mm-hmm.
this is him." So he's got this brother who's mixed ethnicity. So to me, it speaks to like an org. There was like this organization that went across international
Yep.
borders and, different ethnicities and cultures and peoples, and they're all tied together by these common organizations and orders and
I believe so. I really do believe so.
mm,
The ones that have kind of been able to like keep that kind of thing intact are a lot of the ones that are really still part of the aubergine or holding on or operate
yeah,
at a different level, you know. What I mean by that is, I mean, like even with like I like you said, the Crusades, like it there's nothing like someone's personal passion to kind of like really push them to certain levels. Meaning, um, just looking at like the agenda and like some of the knowledge that certain sets had, you know,
yeah,
whether it be the Crusaders or the Masons or Knights Templar or whatever, you know, just the level in which, like you said, level of secrecy and discipline, you know, those very militant orders. And that's what, like, you know, we're speaking about like America's return, like it was some very militant, very organized individuals
yeah,
who were able to do this, and it's kind of like repeated itself throughout history to some degree, you know. Just something I
yeah,
kind of just thought about, you know, in regard to some of the you know, like I said, the people who call themselves preservers of the light, and then
yeah,
the infiltration of that sort. So it's a whole nother war that the public isn't even aware of that's been going on, you know.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I think one of the big things with this war is they don't want people to see how organized it is,
yeah,
and how like the national borders are not really,
yeah.
because I think this whole like the Templars always come up because
Hmm.
Masonry is definitely this international institution.
Hmm.
And people argue it's like, oh, the Templars look this way and they're from this group and this nation and this race. But then it's like, it looks like the Masonic order of like the Knights Templars are like an Egyptian thing. And Egypt was like a total mixed, it was like a
Right,
multinational deal, a
right.
multi-ethnic deal.
Right, right. I mean, and like you speak to the level of discipline, you know, like I can look at Caesar or I can just look at the Arabian Nights, you know, like these are like very smart people, you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
were like in a position to like make influence, you know.
Mm,
And we see it repeated, like, you know, when things kind of get weak, the strong still always rises to the top, whether it's good, bad, ugly, pretty, whatever. Strong always rises to the top, you know. And I think we are, like you said, in many ways, seeing a lot of that now. You know, like the old systems crumbling so weak, but those of us that are strong or really preserving a certain amount of light will just shine a certain way, you know,
yeah.
as a beacon of truth, which, you know, we kind of hit on that a little bit last week or whatever, but I just think it's a great time to live in, you know,
Yeah.
if you're looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. People before us just had to they were getting the shaft and they just had to wait and wait
Right.
and wait.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, man, like the stars really tell the truth, you know, astrology really tells you what's going on. And it's a lifelong study. I mean, I kind of figured that, but the more I have a chance to look at charts, I'm always seeing something new, you know, whether it's something small and relevant to like today or in the grand scheme of things, how energy is connected within the universe, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So yeah, kind of circling back to what I asked you. So yeah, I mean, I think we can both agree that there were like all these different types of people living here. And it's like,
tribes and nations, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's like I was just, being in the Carolinas, it's like I'm thinking about, was it the Gullah Geechee? Is
Yep.
it?
The
It's like,
islands. Yeah.
yeah. It's like
And
they
they
were
have a
there
lot of
already.
ties, yeah, to like South America. I mean, not South America, to Africa, the west coast of Africa. Like the tradition of like the boiled peanuts. You know how you get like the boiled peanuts or whatever?
Yeah.
Apparently, like it was I can't remember exactly which country it is, but it's on the west coast, on the Ivory Coast,
Okay.
where they have a lot of the same cultures as they do on the islands, speak the same language, So I was like, wow, who knows how long, you know, these small pockets of like cultures and civilizations have been interacting with each other,
Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
know they say what it only takes about 50 years for half of what people know to get lost. So
Yeah.
so I think it's a lot closer than what the books have told us for sure, far as like the different tribes and different nations and federations that occupied the Americas over hundreds, if not thousands of years played out a certain way, because even the landmass itself at different times is called different things or by different people. So in the more Islamic state of things or whatever, like I was saying, like you have like the Northwest Gate or Turtle Island is what it's referred to.
Mm,
And then, prior to that, you have India Superior, is what
yeah.
it was called. And then prior to India Superior, I think it was called Prester. And prior to that, an extension of the Tartarian Empire. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
It was like
and
the, oh, sorry, man.
no, please,
I was
please,
gonna
please.
say
I'm
it's
just
like,
running my mouth. I'm just, just running my
well,
mouth.
it's like you even had like the like people in France were calling it like L'America, and then
Yes,
in Ireland you have this like Tir na Nog, like this land of eternal youth, and
exactly,
the
exactly.
people talking about these Western lands, and then what was it? I think the Phoenicians told they told the Greeks they would sink their fleet if they came over here.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
like, you better
And
stay in the
now
Mediterranean.
and that so my whole point to that is at some point you didn't see too much of Europe coming his way for whatever reason. Navy not
Yeah,
strong enough, whatever the case was, didn't know how to
totally.
sell the lands or whatever. And then all of a sudden, there's a breakthrough on some level where we have exploration, and imperialism is back into full-blown motion again. Um, but I think the crazy part, well, just the interesting part about it to me was like when Europe had a chance to start exploring again, they made sure that they rewrote history wherever they went.
Yeah,
And not only that, to control the beliefs, of people. So a lot of times in America, I feel like people really don't know if they're born here, depending on what part of the country they were born and the environment that they were nurtured, they don't really know anything about America. And that's the scary part in politics.
yeah,
You see people just yelling any kind of crazy rhetoric that they feel very strongly about, but
yeah,
cannot tell you why or even who they're actually supporting.
totally.
And I
Yeah,
kind of feel like, with under the guard of like what was created in Christianity, you know, in Americas, it also causes a lot of confusion. So when we start talking about the history and culture, it's almost like forbidden. It's forbidden to talk about anything like, well, it has been forbidden to talk about American history a certain type of way. You know what I mean? Because of
yeah,
the whole tie to God. Uh
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. And
so
God
they
says,
never yeah, they did a good job of like making that a very taboo, sensitive things to speak about, because without communication, you know, I don't think that it really allows true order to come into balance. You know what I mean? Like not being able to
Totally.
find, so yeah, so a lot of different nations and tribes here. I found some things in regard to some of the federations. I believe his name was Tekamesh. Um, and then some of the things up there that were going on up towards like Lake Michigan. So you had certain regions of the country
Yeah.
that were operating at very high capacities,
Yeah.
and have
Yeah. They
been there
say
for a
like,
long time.
yeah, they say like the Mediterranean Bronze Age was like fueled by like copper from Michigan.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
And they
Yeah,
found like basically cities like under the Great Lakes, like
I
under
can
the
believe that.
low water mark. And that's an interesting thing too, like with these cities like near like basically like in the lake off the shores, like in Detroit, like there's a
Mhm.
city under the water. Um,
That's wow. I never knew that. I
and it's
never knew that.
interesting. Yeah, one of my first ancestor, supposedly, this is the
Hmm.
story, but first
Hmm.
ancestor born in French Canada after the immigration in the 1600s. He was like a scout, you know, that and
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
like a fur trade guy, but he used to, you know,
Yeah,
they say
yeah,
he used to
yeah.
lead like parties of Indians to like
Got you.
raid the English colonies or explore or do these different things. But he worked for this guy, Antoine de Cadillac. So Cadillac, the guy the car's named after.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And they're credited with being like, you know, they say that they built a fort like out where, you know, present day Detroit. But I wonder now, like, there might have been a whole city there more advanced than what the
I
European
believe it.
colonies had. And they were going out there to try to trade with them.
I believe that. And just when you speak about some of these locations having very, like we talked about the last time, we talked about how DC was just a power generator, you know what I mean, of energy and things like that. Well, when we talk about Detroit and we speak about some of these like anomalies and things like that, I don't think it's by coincidence that for a long time engineering was so big in Detroit or what. Oh, so here we go. So
There's
here we go.
DC.
Yes. So
So
and
deliberate.
then that's the in the middle, is that the mall there in the green, inside of the green.
Let me see. Um,
So that's
I think
14,
so.
15, 16. Yeah, that's 16th Street. Yep. So the US Capitol. So okay, yeah. So the Pentagon is probably like right there and square in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So and then is this pentagram? So when we look at the city from this direction, right? Is this the top of this? Is this north, south, east, or west? So this is west. This is
Let me
southwest.
let
Okay,
me see.
so yeah, at the bottom and then at the top, that is northwest. So they have the star pointing in the northwest direction. That
Hmm.
so they definitely knew a little bit, if not a lot.
Yeah. Yeah,
They definitely
definitely.
knew a lot of it to draw on that power, to draw on that energy.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And this is DC as well too.
This is DC. I think the mall's at the bottom of it, I want to say.
At the
Wait,
bottom, okay.
let me go back to the other one. The other one has the Oval Office marked like right down here.
Yeah, I see the Oval Office. Okay, so going from the Oval across the line. It's in New York. Okay, boom. Capitol. So that's North Capitol. M Street. So yeah, it might be. So that's L and 16. That's L and so I think so. I think the Washington I mean the monument might be closer there, because if that's the Oval Office there, then you can see like it's on the same mall, you know what I mean? That
I
little land strip or whatever.
Let me see. See if I can pull another one up. Oh yeah. Yeah, because like it should have the owl in it.
Okay.
Let me see. Um yeah, that first one's kind of cut off. Let's try that one out. Oh yeah. So I think that's like the mall down here, maybe.
Okay, got you. So at the top of it, okay. Square and
Yeah.
Compass, U.S. Capitol, Lincoln Memorial. Okay, so everything is on a straight line. So
Yeah.
they got this geometry down to a complete science.
Yeah.
And what's that up the top? So Supreme Council 33 Temple. Okay, so is that in Virginia, I believe? The Supreme Council, that square up at the top there.
I want to say it's still DC.
Still in DC?
I think because I think the Potomac's like over
Oh,
here on
okay,
the
over
left,
on this side. Okay, got you.
if I'm not mistaken. It's been a
Got
while.
you.
It's
No,
been a
no, no,
while.
no, no, no. So yeah, you usually have to cross over to get to Virginia. It just said on the other map that that was south west or southeast, yeah, southwest. Because there's a really big Masonic lodge right across the DC line in Northern Virginia, but that's it's in Alexandria.
Oh yeah, so I think like to the bottom left, I think you're gonna
Okay,
find
so that's a whole nother. Okay, got you.
Alexandria.
Yeah, and it's like kind of on the top of the hill. So the funny thing is when we talk about the things prior to the government that was pretty much established for the long haul. Kind of lost my train of thought, but when you look at the influence of like the P2 masonry, things like that, things that were going on in Philadelphia.
Yeah, tell us about P2 masonry real quick.
Yeah, so I'm not too advanced in P2 masonry or whatever,
I
but
always
what
thought
I
of like the Vatican's brand of it, basically. Like,
exactly, these this is what I mean about CIA agents, operatives, like before there was a CIA. I said like that, like they all have this style, like these guys. So if we talk Vatican, let's just go back just a little bit more. You go to Rome, you had all these great thinkers, like
mm,
Marcus Aurelius. That's all these guys did was think about like stoic, expressions and war and politics and things like that. So when we get to the leaders of some of these spaces, in regard to a military type standpoint, you see that they had a plan in place for a long time, it looks like,
yeah,
prior to even touching down on the land, because it's like once land was touched, everybody pretty much knew what the plays were, and it was like, how do we acquire as much as we can? And it seemed like from about the 1600s to about late 1800s, it was a lot of chaos, with different, politics and understanding about what was going on, because I saw some things briefly when I was scanning about how some of the indigenous people had been at war with even the Moors, that
huh,
were occupying dominions within the Americas at that point in time.
wow,
So I was like, wow, like really, you really don't, you think it's one history and you find out like, okay, it was almost like a free fall to steal, I guess. I'm not sure what happened, for it to like
yeah. Real
really
quick,
trigger it like that.
real quick for the audience, if you could just like talk about like who the Moors are.
Oh, okay. So when it comes to like Moorish history, a lot of it you can see in Spain. Like that's like the big pivotal turning point in history where you see Moors from the European frame of things. And prior to the color codes out of the 1500s, which came out of England, color codes.
What is that?
Uh, Color codes are how you identify
People.
people. Yeah. And this is how thorough, the science is, especially with like the English. So as it goes, like King James had a lot to do with that. He had a lot to do with what was going to be happening in the Americas, and that's more or less like 1606,
He's an
when
odd character.
very, very odd character. The
Yeah,
one
because
of the
he was
I
like
get blown away.
his family, they were like these Normans. So the Normans were like these
Mhm.
Vikings who settled in France and they were
Exactly.
given land to stop attacking Paris. And they
Yeah,
eventually,
he was an Edomite. He was an Edomite. He even his way of thinking was so wild. Okay, so like
yeah, he hated the Scottish people, but he was king of Scotland.
right,
But he was a Norman. He wasn't even Scottish. Like he was super weirdo.
definitely a weirdo, and that's why. So I've always wondered how he was responsible for deciding what goes into the Bible
Yeah.
on some levels, or like the King James version of it. Like when you look at the person, not even at the document that was being edited, but just when you just look at the person, he was a wild dude. Like he came here in 1606 to survey the land, went back with the plan in mind to create the London Company and the Plymouth Company, setting up on the Corporation of America to be owned by the London Company, because we're still having to get that kickback to the Queen, and then she has to kick back to the Vatican. As
Yeah,
far
because
as
yeah, it's like she basically got a franchise license from the Vatican. So it's like she
exactly,
has to give them a cut of what she makes.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's like it's
And I
all
think a lot of
mafia.
that, yeah, exactly. It's all mafia, and I think a lot of that also had to do with while we see the Declaration of Independence saying one thing, and then the Constitution of the United States saying "we the people." You know what I'm saying? Like uh, the language in the beginning of it kind of speaks to who they were dealing with and what was going on, and the different fires that they were trying to put out on different fronts. But yes, definitely with the Vatican. Also with the Moors. Okay, so
Oh
with the
yeah.
Moors, like you'll see a lot of them, a lot of what they did, especially in Spain, but even prior to that, when you start to look at the Ottoman Empire and you look at how much of the world they had an influence on, because they were able to sell, so that means they were in contact with different cultures, bringing
Yeah.
about different gains in the economic sector because of trade and who they were trading with and things like that. So when it came to more science, uh, it's an Islamic culture,
Right.
so it would come from that sector to some degree. So when and then prior to that, from what I've read, people of color or copper or anything like that were referred to Moors or Moorish. They were called, or blackamoors.
Yeah.
So when we get to the color codes of the 1500s leading into 1600, with like I just mentioned with King James, they were setting up on when you call people colors, white, black, whatever, you are more or less creating Christian property,
Wow.
yeah, so and that
Wow.
still has a lot to do with a lot of things that are going on right now,
Yeah.
because of how we identify, and it's saying that more or less we are not identifying in our natural selves, which is why a lot of things kind of still happen the way they do within America when it comes to the law, because a lot of us really don't understand how these laws are written. Because like, even if you have a lawyer, I mean, I'm not telling nobody not to get a lawyer. You need a lawyer, get a lawyer, but they both take the same oath. The defense and the prosecutor, they take the same oath.
Yeah, the first
Uh,
responsibilities to the system. It's not
exactly.
you.
So yeah, so it's all governed a certain way. So now when we start to talk about more science and Moorish Americans, um, now like from where I began to pick up this, in this part of history was in the early 1900s, 1915, moving into 1920s, where you have the story of Noble Drew Ali, who
Yeah.
is pretty much responsible for Moorish American temples,
And he was the teacher of Elijah Muhammad, who started Nation of Islam. Or he
that
was
yes,
kind of
and
an
had an
advisor.
influence on the other brother as well. So Elijah Muhammad and Pan-African movement, Marcus Garvey.
Huh.
Marcus
Okay.
Garvey as
Wow.
well. So both of those, with the influence by Noble Drew Ali. Noble Drew Ali has sort of a mystical story, but he was a real man. So it's a lot of things that are like hit or miss, as far as like, credible sources from different resources, not to
Hmm.
discredit it, but the resources are very limited and only from one space, but people say that's for a particular reason. But one of the things I want to point out that he did that changed the landscape, like for sure, was a speech that he gave at the conference in Panama. I believe was in the what's the date, definitely early 1900s or whatever, like 1920s or something like that, where he pretty much called out America for stealing the land from the indigenous people that had the rights to the land. And so this
Okay. But
this kind
not,
of thing kind of gets into go, please.
oh, I was gonna say, but when you say indigenous people, not necessarily exclusively of
Right.
um like
More
Siberian descent. Like it was all
exactly.
kinds of indigenous,
Exactly.
like Moorish
Exactly.
and like different types of Europeans
Yes.
and
Yes,
you
especially
name it.
throughout the Americas, not just the United States, like you say, throughout the Americas.
Yeah. Could we take a
Um,
quick tangent? Could you tell us about when the Pope, I think it was 1490, when he basically declared war on
okay,
indigenous
yes.
peoples
So
that weren't like part of like the religious empires?
yeah, so that was Pope Innocent the Eighth. In 1490. He declared war on all indigenous people around the world. Because I believe at this point in time, that's where it was world domination. They were already ready to make moves to do world domination. And with the weakening of the Moors in Spain, this was going to make it possible for a new power to kind of come up. So then in
Do you think
14,
do you think
mhm.
he was antagonistic to Islam, or do you think they were sort of like competing corporations that he was
I
going to kind
think
of play
more
by the
so
rules?
competing corporations at this point in time, because Islam was still pretty strong, even
Yeah.
though they were battling with things. I think it was just a competing cooperation type situation. Um, but
So there's,
wanted to
yeah.
establish more control, of the world for sure.
And if they can take their market share from the
Exactly.
Islamic Empire, they'll take it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because that's what it all comes down to.
All market
So
share.
yeah, market share all the way. So like then 2 years later, you start to see the campaigns, like the missionaries, you know what I mean? Um, and them being funded by certain kings, certain queens to do these explorations or whatever. I also feel like in the fall of Spain, you also had people that were already kind of like being paid by Europe in some regard, or like the Vatican or whatever, to infiltrate in certain spaces and things like that. From what I understand, the people that had the most understanding of the waterways at that particular time were the Moors. So it's kind of like they were supposed to be doing this together, I believe. It was kind of like an agreement between the P2 Masons on some level, and then certain Moors on
Okay.
some level. So then that brings us to Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, where the capital was at first, you have a couple things that happen where George Washington, been like a military guy. They were able to kind of more or less what they call chop down the cherry tree.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is like, you hear this term like picking cherry, or like you cherry picking or whatever the case is, you're stealing.
Yeah, yeah.
So that, and then what I found out later is that the Moorish flag is the red flag with the green star on it. And
Oh,
that flag is actually the cherry tree. So they said George Washington chopped down the cherry tree. Okay.
oh,
Then you
wow.
also have this piece about the Mums Day parade, like to keep hush hush about what had happened in Philadelphia. Yeah. So that is the Moorish flag there. The red star. I mean the
Hmm.
red flag with the green star. Now the funny thing is, like I've seen at certain points in time this flag in the White House. Like, how you see the United States
Yep.
flag, you'll see this flag as well, depending on what platform they're speaking to. Or if they're speaking on the international platform, sometimes I see this flag flying behind,
Yeah.
along with the American flag. I think I have a couple pictures because I took some screenshots of it. I was like, well, so to the world, they're saying that, hey, we're in compliance because we're flying under this banner here because we're given permission to do that's what that letter was talking about. The letter with George Washington.
That
It
was a
said,
wild one, man, because it's
yeah,
like that ship got seized by the King of
yeah,
Morocco's privateers for not having a
yeah.
Mediterranean pass, but it's like you can go to the Canaries to Cadiz while still being in the Atlantic. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
they're jumping the gun a little bit too.
Yeah. That kind of just made me just really, like I said, think about the interaction between the two, and it just makes it very clear to see the influence of Morocco on American politics without even like being mainstream. They make it seem
Yeah.
like, oh, we're
Let's
enemies, this and that, but it's kind of like,
let's
the relationship has always been there.
let's break that down for the audience a little bit. So you got
Hmm.
this friendship agreement in what, 1777 or something?
Hmm. Hmm.
So what
The
was that?
treaty, I believe that is a treaty of friendship and peace. And within that treaty, the United States uh, of America, the United States is given permission to do commerce on this land. So now they're established government, and then now they need the credibility to be able to operate here. So in that particular letter, George Washington was saying that they haven't found any mounds, like gold mounds, anything like that.
Yeah,
But he was saying that the land is bountiful and they are for sure going to be able to produce certain crops
a lot of
in
food.
agriculture, which is what the Sultan actually wanted to hear at that time, because same time frame, Morocco was in a famine, and then
Wow.
a few years later, you have a plague that was there for about 3 or 4 years. So the money is shifting, on top of wars been broken
Wow.
out for a while. So now he has to reduce taxes because people can't pay it.
Yeah.
and he has to import more food and things like that because they're going through rougher times. So it makes complete sense as to why the Sultan would be doing business with this new kid on the block,
Yeah.
in the United States that is saying like, hey, we own this land now. We just need permission to come through the ports, and I think they kind of got held up a couple of times because it came through under the wrong flag and,
Yeah.
shipments got seized. So it was just kind of like the day in life of operations at that point in time,
Right. Right.
so it's
Yeah.
pretty
You're in our,
interesting.
yeah, you're within cannon shot of us. So we want a
Exactly.
piece of the action.
Exactly.
But
So,
and so
um,
is it correct that the Sultan of Morocco was the first like world leader to acknowledge like American
yes,
independence?
from what I read, that's what I read. He was the first one to acknowledge the United States of America.
Because we usually think it's the French, but they were like number two.
Yeah, and that relationship was I found out recently was built by Thomas Jefferson. He
Right.
was the acting minister, like 1786, I believe, for America to the French. It was a Confederation of America, that he
Mm.
was the minister of. So then we see things about the Louisiana Purchase, which, he had a lot to orchestrate because the French pretty much occupied that space at that given time or whatever. So yeah, like
That seems like a weird deal that Louisiana purchased because it's like Napoleon didn't really control it, but it was almost like
yeah.
he was like selling looting rights to Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It's like just like a
Mafia.
backdoor deal, you know what I mean? Like, look, I'm gonna steal this, but when I steal it, like
I won't
I cut
declare
you in a
war on you if
piece.
you try to steal it.
Exactly. So uh yeah, so even with like the Statue of Liberty being given to us by the French and things like that,
Mm,
um as I think they said a beacon of liberty, what I'm saying, for the
yeah.
United States. But then it has these weird things of, not weird, but these things that you never really hear about, like the shackles that were on her legs, on the Statue of Liberty's legs or whatever. I believe they're on the arms too, but they took them off, or the French redid it or something, but the shackles are still
Wow.
on the leg. And it was supposed to be a representation of
Well, like breaking shackles, like?
yeah, breaking shackles, breaking freedom,
Wow.
So
Wow. Never knew
yeah,
that.
so it's some pretty interesting stuff like that that's right in our face a lot of times, that is very hush hush.
Huh.
Yeah,
So
but
they
yeah,
didn't want
so
people asking like what shackles did we break
right,
kind of thing.
exactly. Like I
Shit.
said, when you look in at it, it's like they were building and stealing at the same time,
It's crazy. So it's like this whole thing is like you've got these religions that are basically international empires, and it's like
Absolutely,
basically the Americans like they want to get out from
absolutely,
under the Christian one, so they're like they
absolutely,
appeal to the Islamic one. They're like, hey, can you help us out? And they're like,
absolutely. When it
yeah, but
comes to
you're gonna have to use our rules, and you're
yep,
gonna have to. So it's like you were telling me about the sheriffs. It's the sharif. It's like this
yeah,
Islamic official, and
yeah,
they're the head law enforcer in all of these counties in these states, except for Louisiana, which has parishes, and that's like straight up Catholic,
right,
like
right,
Vatican.
right. They it just blew my mind with that whole thing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
there's some weird shit with Louisiana. Like the Fourth Marine Division is headquartered out of New
really,
Orleans. Yeah, but Fourth Marines doesn't have Marines. It's a reserve division, and they do like
wow,
all the weird like black ops intelligence, like special operations shit.
wow.
And
Is
they
that out
say
of Fort? What is that on there? Fort Polk, or no? Is that's an army base?
Polk's way out in the sticks. I don't know what's in New Orleans. Like they just have
Uh,
some little like office building in New Orleans, and that's they actually think Oswald was working for Fourth Marines because
Great.
he was
Oh yeah, they
in
did say that. They did say that.
yeah,
They
he was
did
in that
say-
corner building in New Orleans. It was
Yeah,
across the street from the federal building that had like CIA, Naval Intelligence, FBI. So Oswald was like on one corner and he's running his like pro-Cuban communist thing. But then on the other corner, there's
right.
a guy named Guy Bannister. He's a private detective who was FBI before that, and he was Naval Intelligence before that. So it's like
Wow.
it's
Wow.
different streets, but they go into the same building. So it's like
Wow. Okay,
under
see, I
the
didn't know any of that, but that
oh
makes
yeah,
complete sense to me. It does. Um,
yeah. And then you had this whole like it was called like the American Orthodox Catholic Church or something like that. That was all
mhm.
wrapped up in the Kennedy thing, where it's like a bunch of the conspirators, including J. Edgar Hoover, were bishops in this like Orthodox Catholic Church thing.
And
There are
see,
no,
there we go again with that struggle for power. You know what I mean? There we go
no
again. It's like, how many merits or badges do you have on your uniform? Who you fighting for? You know?
yeah.
Um, wow.
Let me see if
So
I can
yeah,
let me see if I can find a picture. Um, like J. Edgar Hoover, there was like a picture of him in like a Catholic bishop like get up. You know, because he was a Shriner and a Mason and all that shit. But
yeah, he
then
was. It definitely was. And that's the thing, like, so you have these other degrees past 33. Like you got these other secret sets and lodges that go like, so, 56 degrees, 96 degrees,
mm,
so the rabbit hole goes pretty deep, and if you're like in certain sets of cardinals and bishops and but
yeah.
it's like two tier, like you said, like more or less kind of like the Christian side of things, and then the Islamic side of things, as far as like that, those power structures.
Yeah. Oh, I can't find the damn thing. But anyway,
It's all good.
you dig into it. It's
Yeah.
like the guy Joe Pesci played was one of these bishops in this church, this Orthodox Catholic church that had no priests and no congregations.
Yeah, I can I can believe it. Hey, look, these boys about serious business,
Yeah.
and now here's a thing that I've noticed, like the all most of the elite all pay attention to astrology. All of them. All of them. They read this thing better than, most, day-to-day people, because, like we were saying before, so many people kind of see astrology as an entertainment because of the way they were introduced or fed to it or whatever, not understanding it's a very an exact science. It's an ancient science that's very exact,
Mm.
with very deep levels to it. So um when we talk about like the Pope and things like that, I think they definitely have a lot of this knowledge. I think the more you go up in degree work in certain fraternities and lodges or whatever, uh, you get exposed to certain knowledge about, certain things. Now, what do you have to give for it? That's a whole nother question, like most
Right.
likely your soul in the next 3 lives, you know what I mean? Something wild about it. But
Yeah.
um, you know,
Yeah.
it
Here,
comes to a person's belief and you're dealing with religion, like I said, it's almost impossible for that person to really understand what Islam talks about a lot about I self mastery,
yeah.
Um, so what do we have? So this is
This is St. Peter's
oh,
in the
okay, got you.
Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
So you got some astrology right here. So you got this cross. So you got
Mm-hmm.
two solstices, a summer and a winter, and two equinoxes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get the two in between points where like the seasons begin. So you got like
Got you.
what is it? It's like um Beltane, like May 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of the X is like it's called Lammas. I mean, the Irish call it
Okay.
Lammas. It's like it's like August 1st when the sun's halfway between summer
Okay, cool.
solstice and like a fall equinox. And then down here you got like November 1st, which is Samhain, like Halloween, All Hallows Eve.
Yeah.
And then the other one is it's Imbolc or Candlemas. It's like February 1st. It's like the first day of spring because it's halfway between a solstice and equinox. So yeah, the Vatican's got it going on right under our faces.
And now, like a lot of these things that you mentioned are kind of like sitting on like, if not cusp inside of like certain astrological signs that are have major portals, especially like the first one
Mm.
that you talked about, like in August,
Oh,
because you have like the Lion's Gate, in August that opens up
mm.
certain things, and then like you said, like Day of Hollow. Now, I followed some of this in different capacities, as far as just like some of the tribes that were dealing with the Day of Hollow. Um, and if you like really take it back, it like I said, this is all personal research or whatever, but I was interested in it. But you can find certain indigenous people and certain tribes that kind of aspire to some of the same things because culture kind of like follows people or whatever. So the Day of Hollow, a lot of times you see like the like in like Mexico, like the Day of the Dead, or like souls that are passed over and things like that, whether they're good or bad or whatever the case is. But then when you get to India, certain parts of India, you know what I mean? And we're still kind of talking about that tribal indigenous thing. Then you have the untouchables, who pretty much in the early part of things were the ones that dealt with the dead,
Yeah.
um, and they were seen a certain way and shunned and things like that. But if you go a little further back and you get into the tribe of Issachar,
What's that?
um, the tribe of Issachar is one of the tribes of Israel that they were like seers, but
Wow.
they also dealt with the dead, So then when you look at this whole thing of like India and Hindu, you know, um, like I said, you can just kind of follow culture across different lines of what we've been, exposed to or told. So like when you get into India and get into Hinduism on a lot of levels, one of the things that I thought was like really eye-opening is the way that it talked about the dark, or like, so like you have the light, but you have more darkness. And we know that the light comes from the darkness. So the darkness has to be there. So then there are certain things that occupy certain level of dark space. And I was like, so it kind of gave me the ability to look at quote unquote what we call dark or whatever the case may be, without the emotion attached to it that's
Yeah.
been charged by a lot of like what we see in America's in religion, Christianity, Islam. Is like, oh, it's dark, oh, it's bad, that
Won't pay
whole
attention.
philosophy, which keeps you limited and keeps you from being able to really, explore some of the deeper levels of your inner conscious or your subconscious state,
Yeah.
So yeah, the Day of Hollow kind of just I was able to follow some of that tribally, or just kind of just looking at cultures and how certain cultures have similar things. And once I got to Hindu or into India, it brought me back to again this whole thing about um this title of Prester, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because in the map, one of the maps that I saw is like Prester John, this priest king, ruled all three Indias, so I've read the Bible and other religious books as well, but in particular in the Bible where it talks about the story of Lazarus, right?
Yeah.
So okay, and the more science when they talk about Yeshua, they kind of like explain some of his voyages, like how he went to the mystery schools in Egypt, how
Right.
he went to India, and studied medicine. So he studied in these different lands, and when he became like of age, to fulfill his ministry, he had already studied in these different places. So when it came to Lazarus and him raising him from the dead, well, I'm pretty sure there's some guru on top of some mountain somewhere that's tapped in, that understands, quote unquote, what we call the dead enough to be able to operate a certain space. So I was
Mm.
kind of able to like tie that down through the culture versus the story that gets painted to me a certain type of way or whatever, to
Yeah.
see that, okay, these people, these tribes, these nations, they were known for certain things. There were certain things within their culture, and you can see how some of it kind of migrates as time moves along. So that was one of the things about the Day of Hollow that I kind of, now there's a flip side to it, of course, like, all grim and dim, but just without the charge of motion about some of the, yeah, no, so like in Russia, and parts of Germany, you see a lot of stuff about Prester John. You see a lot of documentation about Prester John, and the most of the paintings, excuse me, are like this, of this, copper color man,
Yeah,
copper color,
totally.
type person.
And he's
Um,
dressed like a Russian bishop. You mentioned Russians.
exactly. So like, what was it? Um, the Royal Hebrew that were in Europe for a time period, they were under the protection of what they call the Rus,
Oh,
R-U-S-E. So
it's
so
like
then
the
you have
Vikings
that
who
piece there.
created Russia.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Another nomadic type people at one point
Indigenous
in time.
people.
Yeah, indigenous people. Exactly.
So, kind of for people to like put a concept on this, like Tartaria, it seems to me like it was this confederation
Hmm.
on multiple continents of like indigenous people. And it seems like this Prester John was like, it was like a title that different people
Yeah,
would take up as like one
exactly.
leader step down,
Yeah.
and then you
If you
but
look
then
at
you
the
had this.
etymology of it, yes, like, the Prester John, the, like we said, like Prester getting more or less to priest, and then John or Juan or Khan, all of those things kind of mean king. And then when we
Yeah,
get into this whole thing of priest king, now we're back into this quote unquote Hebrew culture, or in some ways Asiatic indigenous people.
yeah, yeah, totally. So you ever seen these guys?
With the human
Like
top, and then the
it's like a
uh
well, it's like a human, but he's got on this like fish suit. So the hat is like the fish head, and then the scales are like the cape. Um,
yeah, I see it, I see it, I see it, I see it.
so these priests would dress up. This is like a Sumerian and Babylonian god. His name was
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oannes. So it was like Oannes. And from that, you got the word like Johannes, like the German and
Okay.
Dutch. And then John or Jean came from that.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
John was like, so in this Oannes, he was like this. They describe him as a fish god, or at least a god who wore this like fish costume. But
Got you.
the
Yeah.
idea was that he came onto the land out of the Persian Gulf into like
Wow.
Sumer and Babylon, and he would baptize his followers. So the whole baptism thing.
Okay. Okay.
But
That is
then,
that is deep.
yeah, and then when you pull up, let me see, like the Pope wears a thing like that.
Yeah, the headdressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, let me see if I can find a full. Yeah. So it's like he's got the hat like the fish mouth.
Yep. Yep.
And then the gold cape often looks like scales. And I'm trying to find that, trying to get a good shot of the cape. Oh yeah, and he's holding
Lots of
some.
symbolism, man.
Yeah,
Lots of
he's holding some
symbolism.
crazy pine cone
Yeah.
thing too. And
And the hat with the two horns is kind of like the supposed to be like a halo or some sort or whatever, like the
oh,
crown chakra type thing or whatever. Because like in a lot of paintings, you'll see like Moses or some biblical person. Not in all of them, but sometimes they have horns. They have horns coming out of their
yeah,
head or whatever, and that's kind
yeah,
of like supposed to represent the halo, or the halo effect or whatever the case may be. So it's a lot of symbolism in these drawings.
yeah, yeah. Shit. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like, just how much is going on.
Yeah, and then like the rituals and the rites, and so I wonder. I mean, I don't know, but so the Fisher of Men, that was like the
Right.
big thing, the Fisher of Men. And the funny thing about what you were saying about the fish, like I don't know how true it is, but they keep finding well, I don't know if they find it or not, but there's a lot of stuff popping up about mermaids and like people of the sea being
Yeah.
found like all over, well, at least in the last month or so, I've seen like quite a bit of like,
Really?
yeah, these people who have like a scale bottom and then a human top or whatever.
Huh.
It's been a lot of weird anomalies kind of like popping up like over the last 2 months, where it's really made me think of certain things.
Huh. There was a thing, the one thing like that's really documented and I know about was, you ever heard of Lake Baikal?
Lake Baikal, yes, I've
It's like
heard
out
of it.
in
I don't.
Siberia.
Okay, got you.
Pull it up on the map. Um, it's like the largest freshwater lake in the world.
Oh wow.
It's like
Okay.
north of Mongolia. So I guess the Soviet military like would do a lot of their dive training out there because
Yeah,
it's like thousands of feet deep and you can do any kind of diving you want.
got you.
So there's a documented case where they were in there, they were diving in like the 1960s, and they were like a good 100, maybe 150 feet down.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw a swimmer down there, but it was like humanoid, but
Mm-hmm.
like 9 feet tall. And he had, it looked like a form fitting like silver suit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so they'd
Mm-hmm.
see him down there. And then like the commanding officer or whatever at the base was like, I want you to grab him.
Yeah, grab that in the water.
So they tried to do this. And when they tried, basically these divers were like forced out of the water. So when you
Mm-hmm.
go from 150 feet to, you
Yeah,
know,
to the top.
the
Yeah.
air, like it's like instant bends. Like I think only one of them
Oh wow.
survived and he was like permanently crippled. But like, what the hell did they see, and who could like just force you out of the, what could force you out of the water like that?
That's alchemy on another level. Like
Yeah.
I've been in this whole thing about charged plasma, and then like
Oh.
how the hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe or whatever. So there's these physicists that say that gravity is just more or less dense hydrogen, you know what I mean? And like being able to like change the vibration of it will put you in a state of bliss. This is a lot of like out of this guy named Dan Winter. He does a
Hmm.
lot of stuff with like phage conjugate, refractal space, things like that or whatever. But yeah, so talking about like just changing like the composition of things or working with frequencies, I can see that happening. Especially with what we know about something called, see if I can remember the word, samoluminescence, which
Wow.
is pretty much vibration underwater. So pretty much the way samoluminescence works is like if a vibration can be created underwater, it kind of like creates a bubble, you know what I'm saying, a vibration or whatever, and it expands and expands and expands until when it explodes, it gives off light. And this is some of what they try to tie into or what they are able to tie into, like, okay, they like to like using some of the text out of Genesis, um, where it's kind of like it said in the beginning there was the earth was void and without form, and it talks about the waters, and then it says, then it said, let there be light. So not actually someone physically saying let there be light, but when you invoke a vibration, that is a sound. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So a vibration is a sound. So they're saying that because the universe is full of plasma, that's pretty much what all things is just plasma on a certain wave or whatever the case may be, that a vibration came through the plasma. And we know now that you can create vibration underwater that will give off light. So
Wow.
yeah, it's very
Wow.
interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff.
And the
Just
ancients
physics,
understood it.
huh?
The ancients understood this stuff.
Exactly. Especially so, which brings me back to astrology. Like we said before, you know, every planet holds a certain energy, especially depending on what position that is in at that particular time, whether it's in a trine or a square or a sextile. We know that's kind of like the chemistry or the sacred geometry connecting those angles together to give off a certain energy. And with the universe being plasma, like water, certain frequencies are going to move through a vibration a certain way. And, the perfect example of that is the moon effect on the earth, high tide, low tide, for even an example, So um, I'm getting a deeper understanding of like just how some of these celestials operate through certain waveforms and able to do things, when I kind of imagine those waves being water, which plasma being a liquid, and how it can, we can raise our vibration and tap into a certain frequency or operate from lower vibrations, which aren't necessarily bad all the time because, bass helps us stay grounded and things like that. But,
Mhm.
the real math behind some of these formulas to be able to ascend, keep your balance, all of the good stuff that we're looking for in this life, with clarity, So yeah, so definitely.
Hmm. Yeah, this is pretty amazing. So, yeah, it's interesting how these. So this Tartaria, this like almost worldwide confederacy that they sort of lived this indigenous lifestyle. It's
Yeah,
amazing how they. It's like you wonder how the hell did they get under the thumb of these like religious empires?
that's a good
Christianity and
question.
Islam and Buddhism.
I think that my personal opinion, that there was a cataclysmic event of some sort, whether it was the
Hmm.
flood, which we see a lot about some type of flood or weather shifting or whatever the case. But I believe something happened in the 1700s. I think maybe prior to that, but definitely in the 1700s somewhere, some type of cataclysmic event.
Yeah.
Um, that was the post to something that had happened prior. But I don't, and because of the way history is written, I think they absolutely for sure made sure they kept that out of the history books of a cataclysmic event shaping the world in a certain way. Because if you do have, a group of people that are in charge a certain way or whatever, and let's just say they got the impact, they got the bulk of the impact of whatever was going on,
Right.
it creates an opportunity for, a new rise of power, Um, so I think that has something to do with it. uh,
Yeah. I'm trying to find this map. I can't find it, but there were French maps from the 1600s.
mm,
And they were good at traveling and map making, and they were
mhm,
great
mhm.
explorers. There were no Great Lakes in these maps.
Really?
And it wasn't until like the end of the 1600s where they
Wow.
started. Because the Great Lakes are easy to get to. It's like you just go up the St. Lawrence River
Yeah.
in Canada,
Yeah.
and it's like you're in the Great Lakes, and it's like so they couldn't have
And
missed them.
like you said, I think they keep that kind of thing out on purpose, like when you're talking about the Great Lakes, when you're talking about Minnesota, why does Minnesota have a connection with the Vikings, and the
Ah,
people finding Celtic crosses, in the ground, or Celtic writing, or whatever the case may be,
yeah,
artifacts, in Minnesota, so it's like, yeah, like,
yeah,
and then, I think certain land masses were connected a certain way. I mean, yes, we know about Pangea and the breaking up of it, but where we are now and like where we were at one point in time, like you were saying earlier about a city that's underwater, or these towns that kind of broke off, from certain land masses and probably was there for a while, or certain regions that were in certain places, and then all of a sudden you just don't hear anything else about it anymore,
yeah,
so
yeah,
definitely. What we
yeah. So
got here?
these are the Kensington runestone from Minnesota. So it's the
Mm, mm,
Germanic runes that they use for magic and for writing in, and and they've tried to say this was like a 100-year-old hoax, but it's like not a
nah,
lot of people had rune knowledge like in America.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, there's so much crazy shit. It's like when I lived out in California, we used to go out into like one of the interior valleys, and there was like a story about like a Spanish galleon that was like wrecked in the desert
Mm,
because it's like basically they say California was like an island or a peninsula, and then
yeah.
something happened. So yeah, it seems like these I don't know, these scam artists from Europe, like they kicked the people here, all the peoples here when they were down at some point. What oh, I know what it was. It was the comet of I think 1666. No,
Okay.
1664. Let me do a quick search for
Yeah,
that.
that sounds like, something that definitely
Yeah, it was
changed the
visible in
landscape.
the Americas. Um
In the 1600s.
1664, yeah.
That would make sense. That's like 100 years prior to the revamping of a lot of things.
And then like so the map I was telling you about was made before that comet. No Great Lakes.
Hmm.
And then after that, you see these lakes.
Oh, then you
So it's
see the
like,
lakes. Wow.
yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So what the
And then
hell?
I've always kind of wondered why it was called Lake Erie. There's certain things about what they called it.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And then you
Yeah.
have that whole thing. The other thing about it, also, I've always wondered what in the world are they doing in Flint, Michigan? You know,
Whoa.
it's kind of like on purpose, they are like really neglecting that particular region.
It's like they just
Uh,
want them gone.
yeah, the same thing with like I think about Louisiana, you know what I mean? Like I think the government or powers that be just want people out of certain places. Like the fact that what is it? Monsanto's is down in Puerto Rico, heavy, pretty much took over the whole island.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, like after that hurricane that hit a few years ago, they
Oh,
kind of like they didn't rebuild on purpose. It's like people couldn't get resources. The
did they?
electricity was out forever. They were being treated a certain way down there. And it was kind of like to force people off the island. And then the next thing you see
Wow.
are these big Monsanto campuses
Holy
in Puerto
shit.
Rico.
So they like
Yeah,
buy land on the cheap?
yeah, or stole it. One of the two. One of the two. I'm not really sure how they
Holy
did it, but
shit.
they're down there creating the GMOs of everything. I'm like, wow, like
And that's the
this is
thing.
incredible.
Yeah. And that's the thing that the Russians are pissed about right now is they keep pushing these GMOs further towards their borders and they don't allow it.
Yeah,
a
yeah, that
country.
whole thing with what's going on in Russia, especially with understanding that there were a lot of labs, backed by the UN along that borderline, where we got like where Belarus and places like that.
Yeah.
Um, I know, it gets, played out in the media a certain way, and then, no one want to see like people get injured. But I really think that that whole piece really has more to do with something more ancient than them just wanting Ukraine,
Oh yeah. Well, check
yeah.
this. So this is like Scythian, or you could say Tartarian, like gold work.
Mm,
So
that's
basically,
incredible.
yeah, these were found in grave mounds in like the old Russian Empire. So we're talking like Russia,
Okay.
Ukraine. Um, Peter the Great in the 1700s, these mounds are getting looted, so he made it a capital offense to
To
steal this
Lulu.
stuff.
Hmm. Look at the
Um,
detailed work on that, man. I mean, that doesn't look like anybody that is Stone Age to me, like you
no,
don't even see that kind of craftsmanship today in a lot of things.
yeah, but it's funny. But they were like nomadic. It's like, do you ever see Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
Like I think, remember Rohan, where they lived in like that wooden city, the horse
Yes.
people. I think
Yeah.
that's who he was modeling Rohan after.
It's funny that you say that because Lord of the Rings, and then I watched this series called that was on HBO. Dang, it was the series that was on HBO.
Game of Thrones.
Of course, Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones. The Dothraki people
Oh yeah,
with the
yeah,
horde. So it's like they'll let them be represented to some degree, just to kind of say, okay, yeah, these people were here, but
yeah,
they always make it very, convoluted about what's where and what was going on,
yeah. Totally,
yeah,
totally.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, there's something like just in Ukraine alone, there's something like 100,000 of these mounds,
really.
artifacts like this. Yeah,
Wow.
there's a whole thing with like Ukraine and like Romania, like the Black Sea coast.
Yes,
So
yes. I've seen some some documentaries on some of the more esoteric stuff in regard to Ukraine, Romania, and things like that. What
yeah,
seems like, yeah,
some people think that the Anunnaki
mhm.
and Sumer were basically refugees from like the Black Sea area, because they say like the Black Sea was once a freshwater lake, and then when the
Oh,
sea levels changed, the Mediterranean flooded in.
that would make sense because you got so Samaria, so you have also Sumer is
Yeah,
in there. And then like with the whole piece of astrology. So like that's kind of like the birthplace of like astrology as well. And you
yeah,
know, um, so like this ancient knowledge, it's been, you can see it kind of migrating through certain people, people
yeah,
who kind of stay connected to the land and to stars, stargazing.
yeah.
And then you see some of it play out in the symbolism and things like that.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you a question about something because let's see here. So I know we had those maps, but you know what? I figured I said, maybe some of these dates that were lined up. So I know we started off with Pluto's return, and then what that's doing for the Americas or whatever. But I was like, okay, what else can I find here? So I was just wondering. So in 1788, right? That says that's what in the letter that George Washington had with the Sultan of Morocco or whatever. That was when he says he was unanimously appointed as the
Mm.
supreme executive authority by the nation. So I was like, okay, wonder what kind of transits were going on in some of that some of that spaces or in a year,
Let
you
me
know.
let me check the date of the letters. I might be able to pull something out of that. You want to check the one to the Sultan or to Washington's agent in Morocco?
Let's go to the one to the Sultan first. Let's just see
All
what's
right.
going on with that one.
Let's see. December 1st, 1789. You know what? Let me share the damn software here. Here we go.
Joining us now.
Let's see. Well, these guys are a sun cult, so I'll put noon for the time.
Mm-hmm. New York.
Yeah, oh yeah, right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was almost going from Morocco. Okay. So let's see. We had Saturn in Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically like,
Communication.
yeah, it's communication, and then like Aquarius is like we the people.
Okay.
So it's about like we the people trying to like just get a fair shake to like make a living and like be left alone and
Got you.
not be oppressed and all that kind of shit.
Okay. Okay.
So it's interesting. So the two nodes, so like the dragon's tail, dragon's head,
Yeah.
they were in opposite places as to where they are now.
Really.
So now we got dragon's head and Aries. So that's and then like dragon's tail and Libra. So that's all about like basically kind of claiming your own identity and like going with that and like
Right. I believe
letting
you
some
spoke on
alliances
that.
go that don't serve you.
And is that the so letting the go, is that the K2, and then
Yeah.
like the other part is the coming in is the Rahu?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
Rahu.
right now they're in opposite spaces of where they were then, like far
Yeah.
as like those points of light.
Yeah. To me,
Interesting.
if you get Rahu, he consumes, he's like
Mm-hmm.
obsessive. You get him in Aries, it's like you got to figure out who you are and roll with
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
and let certain relations with other people go.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of this letter in 1789, Rahu was in Libra, which is all about other people, partnerships, business.
Wow. That is
So
interesting.
that was the order of the day. Like, we got to make some relationships here. We got to get some business done.
Right.
And then Neptune was in there with it, not very close, but still in the same sign. So Neptune can be like divinity,
Mm-hmm.
divine gifts, or it can be like total like delusion and deception.
Okay.
It's all
Okay.
about where
That
you
works.
meet it, right?
Yeah. That works. That works for sure. So like it's funny because it was like, working with other people's resources and coming together as groups.
Yeah.
And now you see so many groups that are against each other and breaking down, in
Yeah.
that space, So what those points of lights have been in a different position now, or the opposite position that they were then, you can clearly see that, like even like, oh, I mean, you can pick any protest you want. You got like the pilots that are on protests, like that's causing a major, major situation right now. And then all of the other protests that are going on, like the with the abortion and some of the other things that are going on around the country or whatever. It's like, to me also, I feel like this is just that at point where we're just starting to heat things up, where things don't make any sense and it's forcing people to, well, eventually it's going to force people to really look at what's really going on, because I think right now we still see people operating out of a lot of emotion,
Yeah.
but that's just confusion because
Yeah.
of fear. You know what I mean? So a lot of people are angry because they don't understand what's going on a lot of different levels. And this is also the weakening part of the structure, like it really is, like you see like holes in the infrastructure all over the place. And to someone else, they might have not seen it this way, but I looked at this clip the other day where the president was on a bike ride and he came to a complete stop and fell off his bike. And I was like, yo, are you kidding me? Like, how do you fall off your bike when it wasn't even riding. He was at a complete stop and he was trying to talk and boom, just took a tumble. I was like, all right, was that a hidden, situation that was going on? Like the president of the United States is looking weak and frail and takes a tumble on national television. I was like, yo, what is this guy doing, man?
I'm almost wondering, like, have you ever seen that this woman, she was director of disguise for CIA.
Mm.
And she was talking about, she's even done a TED talk, and she talks about like how amazing that like the mask, like the latex mask technology is.
Oh wow, yeah.
She was
Wow.
talking about like in the early, like before 1992, she was briefing Bush the senior about this. And at the end of the briefing, she goes, and I'm wearing a mask, by the way. And he didn't even know it. So that was 30 years ago.
Wow. So yeah, now I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine now.
Yeah, when I see him, like when I see that happening, or like when he falls on the stairs, but then he like pops back up, I'm like, is that like a 45-year-old actor like wearing a bike mask?
Taking a fall.
Because that's pretty oh yeah, I'm watching video.
For an 80-year-old man to fall off the bike, like that.
But then to just get back up, like who was
well,
it?
He did start riding the bike again. He had one foot off the pedal. I was like,
let me put it up on the screen for a minute here.
Oh man.
So scooping them up.
Yeah, they had to scoop them up off the concrete. The Secret Service looking confused.
But you don't see his face too well.
No, he couldn't.
So I don't know.
We don't know if it was him or not. That's what I'm saying. Is it just like a symbol of some sort? You know what I mean? Like they just throwing indicators out there. I'm like, so you wait until you get in front of the cameras at a complete stop and just fall off the bike. But
yeah,
I mean, they could have sold it pretty well or whatever. So okay, that was pretty interesting about the north and south node being in different places for sure.
Yeah, so it's like, so let me see, 9 years before this. So basically, the Rahu and Ketu, the two nodes, they take 18 and a half years to make a full orbit.
Okay.
So they go to opposite signs like every 9 years.
Okay.
So if you back off 9 years before this, you get to like 1780. And that's where they are now. So that was like the middle of the revolution, and just
exactly
middle of like the shit flinging,
Exactly. Okay,
so we got like another 9 years before,
a shift. Yeah, like
we really like
into a certain space.
Yeah, it's like before we get together and stop bickering.
So 9 years from now, so that would be 32. Okay,
yeah.
So 31, 32. Well, I can see that. I can see some of the projections that have been given as far as like in economics, as far as like where a lot of the bigwigs are putting their money into like digital real estate and the metaverse and this whole thing there, like they're buying up like $1 billion of like this digital space. And it doesn't really make sense to me on every level of like what that really means. But you can see it coming into play. You can see this whole different structure coming into play. And that's how it was before, as far as like, with banking, like they kind of ran the banks that were in the land, they, made sure they got rid of them, like bankrupt them to some degree, or stole certain things, because then you get into the what is it, the freemen's bureaus, which was where like, the freemen put their money.
Huh.
I think Frederick Douglass had a lot to do with trying to preserve the freemen's bureaus as things were going on during the Reconstruction, and not the Reconstruction, but yeah, during and prior to the Reconstruction of the Americas, because of what was going on. It's all economics, when we get to that point about who wanted what and what they were trying to get for it, whether it was the whole 3/5 situation, or being able to establish like what territories you were controlling, because like now we know that certain lands are charged a certain way, and then we got the whole thing about I mean, definitely prior to that, but just people wanting to go west. It was always this thing about going west, pushing deeper into the land, like the frontier, they were always promoting this whole thing to go across the Americas or whatever at that point in time. So, like I said, definitely very well organized. I think even now we see the military or militant, or paramilitary type agencies doing the same thing that we saw them do prior as well, like influencing things, whether it be physically or through some type of strategy to continue to keep a certain influence over, a mass group of people. And like, far as like governments are concerned, like what we see on the surface is fairly weak in a lot of places, but the things that we don't really see any give with and still seem like they're pretty intact are the military structures,
Yeah.
So yeah, so in that regard, I kind of just look at like, okay, well, prior we had, like lodges and Templars and things like that. Now we have FBI, CIA, NSA, Interpol, just these other type agencies or whatever, that pretty much control the truth,
Yeah. Secret societies in their own right.
Exactly. They still control a certain amount of the truth. So it's kind of like you still see these structures in place behind the scenes controlling a lot of what's going on and a lot of what's happened, through security, through force, I think we've seen the Americas doing that, when it came to oil for a long time, like the oil for dollars, and using the Navy to make sure they protect certain waterways and things like that. And now where things are now, it kind of seems like it's a weird space because you don't need physical assets, and the old world is kind of competing to keep up with where the new world is or going, and trying to establish themselves in a new world before anybody else does. But you see the breakdowns everywhere,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hoping with this whole metaverse thing, I'm hoping like as the elite crumble, they just do like a Heaven's Gate, like suicide thing and try to like upload into the metaverse. Like
I'm thinking that they will probably try to do that, or they trying to go to Mars, one of the two,
Yeah. Did you see Mr. Robot? The USA series, Mr. Robot. It was about the hacker.
Oh yeah. I used to watch that, I
Okay.
used to binge watch it actually when it come on USA,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Because White Rose, the Chinese guy who was like the head deep state dude, like running the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
he tried to do that. Like he tried to use that that hadron collider thing to like create a parallel universe where like his lover was alive, and
That's
and he shot himself because he thought he was going there. Like it's like I wonder if that's their plan because they're fucked. You know what I mean?
I think so to some degree. I think they're running away. So like in a lot of like different scriptures when you're talking about like just from like a religious or just a belief standpoint, when they refer to astrology, they kind of say like they make reference to the end of days,
Yeah.
and like we are in that phase where we're these are the last days or were the last days of Pisces, which is the end of a time period, and the things that they said would come during that time period. Now, do I think the world is over? No, I don't think that. I think it's just the beginning of a new age,
Yeah.
but with that kind of shift happening in the universe, you know, how could I not think that they're going to be changes on a molecular level? You know what I'm saying? Like, because the universe is changing, it's shifting. So,
Mm.
um, and I think the powers that be that are in control, yes, this is the last days, and which is why we're going to see certain wars and false
Scandals.
prophets, which are a lot of times screens and things like that. So, you know, there's a lot of relevance to what they were saying, but the perspective in which it was painted was to create a state of fear, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I don't think that we have to subscribe to that, to that fear mongering, that level of control and oppression, because those of us that have the truth, have the ability to shine more light and bring things forth that we want to see happen. And that is this whole thing with like, I think with the with the collective. I think wherever the collective mind goes is kind of like how we kind of either go towards or sway away from, you know what I mean? And they knew that to some degree, for however long. I mean, going back to prior to the radio, just theatrical shows, you know what I mean? The theater and things like
Yeah.
that. Let me play with your imagination. So you come and watch the program, you know what I mean? So it's always been there, this thing about programming, visions, like the television or whatever, you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
radio. So I think we had all of these things like that have been influences for for quite some time. And in the end of days, the way it was written a certain way, maybe, because a lot of times when people get prophetic knowledge or just they're psychic, yeah, it can be spot on, or it might have some metaphor things in there that you have to kind of dig through to kind of like, make it make sense or come into the truth of it for yourself. So I
Mm.
feel like there are two things that are happening. Like the earth is shifting into a higher vibration, because we have the knowing if you are choosing to go that way, and then it's separating itself from the lower vibration of the earth, and it's happening all at the same time, like all at one time. Now, do I feel like this is just an event that's just happening here? No, I think like the earth is playing a very crucial role in what the universe is like saying that it wants to happen,
Yeah.
and we have influences outside of ourselves that are pulling us one way or another, which is why I believe self-mastery is so important at this time, because without knowledge of yourself, like it is impossible for you really to like stay balanced within yourself. or have a sense of peace. And I think we're moving more and more into that whole thing where sometimes people are just going to be like, you know what, forget the screen. I can't look at the screen. Those of us
Yeah.
that are operating in higher vibrations, and those who can't, they're glued. They've become, that's their belief system. They're enslaved to that now,
Hmm.
So yeah, so it's very interesting to see this whole breakdown of groups. As before, the point of lights were like, coming together, whether it was deceptive or whatever for a good cause or whatever. And now you see the breakdown of groups of people that were at one point they were on the same page, and now, man, it's almost total anarchy, and then divisions within those groups as well.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
Yeah.
all Piscean, Age of Pisces institutions. It's like, you know, imperial Roman Christianity and
Mm-hmm.
Islam and even
Mm-hmm.
Judaism, we know, all created their own Pisces. And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
government as we know it, education as we know it.
And that's funny because like the whole statement of fisher of men, you know what I mean? Which is
Yep.
kind of like what these things did, like they gathered them in groups, Yeah, so the language is very interesting, it's always telling us something, but then we come into these new understandings of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. So yeah, so Aquarius, nobody's gonna fish you. It's like they may still mislead you because Aquarius has its own dark side. It's like
Guys,
scientific, like medical tyranny. It's like they've already tried to roll it out, and
they
introduce it.
have, and then with Aquarius being an air sign, you know, um, man, just looking at it from that standpoint, like with the air, it's a lot lighter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it can be flighty. You know what I mean? So the stabilization of things and things like that. I think about that when I think about Aquarius. Just like the intelligence. You know what I mean? Like how it's spread and who has control over it. And then with air and communication, and it like brings me into like some of the tarot, like the King of Swords, Queen of Swords kind of energies, you know what I'm saying? Like Queen of Swords can be a royal bitch, like it's like no joke, it's for real. So Aquarius is going to be very interesting, like with the truth, like
Yeah.
it'll cut some things up. Like the truth can be ugly sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think we definitely are starting to like peek ahead into some of that, just seeing some ugly truths.
Yeah. That air energy is a tough environment to control people
Yeah,
because all of a sudden
yeah,
they can just spontaneously get information.
yeah, exactly,
So it's
exactly.
it's like I think they're gonna show the people who want to maintain control of people they're not gonna be able to hide how ugly they are. So then you're either gonna be repulsed or people are gonna have like Stockholm syndrome and like
Yeah,
they're gonna still want it.
and I
It
think
was
that's why they're trying to influence some level of control and slavery, because it's like they know that people are waking up.
yeah.
Um, and when I say slavery, I'm talking about like slavery of the mind. You know what I mean? You don't have to put any chains or any of that kind of stuff on people when you have their mind.
They realize that worked better.
Exactly. And you see it a lot. Like I was saying before, like how miseducated so many people in the country are, when at one point in time America was known for education. I mean, we still are,
Yeah.
but you just see the crumble of like a lot of these structures. And then people who actually have the truth, they're not using it in the best intention for all people. And you see this crumbling of that on a lot of different levels. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see like how in regard to what we're talking about, this age of Aquarius, how people are educated, we're starting to see different forms of that now, even with like us doing a Zoom, platforms like YouTube, even though they try to censor the crap out of a lot of people,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's that struggle there. And then a lot of these other screens, so it's not like you can't get the truth, it's there for you, but there are also people who don't want you to have the truth, and they flooded it as well, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It seems like Aquarius is like, instead of just a few information sources, it's like a needle in a stack of needles, and you have to be able to examine the needles and
You're gonna
see
have to
what,
know. You're not gonna be
yeah,
able to guess. Yeah,
yeah, what's the good one.
yeah, yeah. And I guess I will come to that with experience and wisdom. Right now, just a bunch of babes making noise. You know what I mean? Like, far as like the growth and maturity and like this whole 5D thing and uh becoming unified and love and what that really means, like love of self. So many people don't they're clueless when you talk about love of self. I mean, some people think of pampering and things like that. I mean, that's part of it, but
Or they think
no,
it's like egotistical
yeah,
when you say
yeah,
that.
yeah, but not the discipline of sacrifice or holding yourself accountable. you
Yeah.
know these are the things of like the love of self, like to be true with yourself.
Yeah.
So
Do
I
it,
think
do what's best at the expense of like instant gratification.
right, right. And it's like right now, because I believe the screens have created sensory deprivation, just an overload.
Yeah, I think with these like teenage and like adolescent suicides, it's like they're
Yeah.
just fried from information. Like it's just too much.
And I believe it. I know it's possible. I know it's possible. I've seen it within myself. Like, if I get hooked into a subject and I can't let it go, after like a couple of days or a week or whatever, I'm like, all right, I need to give this a break, because it's
Yeah.
information overload,
Yeah. Do you ever
you
see
know,
Johnny Mnemonic? It was like Keanu Reeves and Ice Cube and Henry Rollins.
no, 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 no. I haven't
It was
seen that.
like it was like mid 90s, and basically he was this like he was it took place in the future. I think it took place around
Mhm,
now. And he was a
mhm,
courier. So he had basically like a neural,
mm,
like a like a brain
gadget.
implant, like a hard drive, and he would basically he was a courier for like illegal information.
Wow.
So they
Okay.
put so many terabytes in his head, and he would like deliver it. And it was all encrypted. And um, so that was Keanu Reeves, and then Henry Rollins was like a doctor, like in this like kind of underground like resistance. And then
Hmm.
Ice Cube was one of the resistance leaders, and they were
Hmm.
trying to. What was going on was there was this like neurological syndrome, and like
Mm.
the drug companies and the government were saying, "Oh, it's a disease," and they're going with germ theory. But then the Ice Cube and Henry Rollins were like, "No, it's just overload from fucking screens, and it's destroying people's nervous systems."
That is incredible because that
Yeah,
is so true. Like they they put so much true information in these movies. Sometimes it's scary.
yeah.
Because like the funny thing is like, so I'm over here in Europe, so like they had RoboCop on the other day. Oh no, Total Recall. It's Total Recall with like Arnold. And
Okay.
I haven't seen this movie in God knows how long, but so it was on the TV, and I was just looking at some of the things that were in the movie, like the screens. They have flat screens all over in the movie, and this is a movie from the '80s, like the flat screens that we have now. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
um, so the movie Total Recall, it was dealing with your subconscious as well. Like you can buy vacation in your mind, you
Yeah.
know. So it was like for like 2 weeks, it calls like 900 credits, so that was how they were operating off of credits, which is kind of like crypto, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You give a credit or whatever, and then you kind of go off in this space for within your mind for the next 2 weeks, and that's your vacation. You don't actually go there. So it's like we see a lot of like those things happening now with like virtual reality in
Yeah.
the metaverse. Now I'm not heavy into it, but I had some clients that they played professional ball and like they were like, so they had the money, is what I'm trying to say. And they were super heavy into virtual reality. Like,
Really?
I mean, scary, man. Like this guy would be in virtual reality for like most of the weekend.
Oh,
Yeah. Now, because like I said, he has money or whatever, like he has access to these other spaces within the virtual reality. So it's kind of like a celebrity going to a party. You know what I mean? You gotta still pay with the crypto or whatever to get into this party, but they're there. And some of that crazy stuff that's coming out of like China where um like what is it, like the 5 or 6D or whatever. So it's like a hologram, but you can feel it.
oh
You
my
can actually,
God.
yeah, man, it's some wild stuff. Like, but
Oh,
people see, this is that part that I was just kind of saying, like, man, like already you got some of that going on in some of those spaces, you know what I mean? Like when
yeah.
it comes to the mind or whatever. So I don't know, it kind of seems like we're in Sim City, man. Like it just
Yeah.
kind of seems like Sim City.
Yeah. Oh my God. I never knew that. That's friggin' insane.
Yeah, it blew me away too. It blew me away at one that people can spend so much time.
Yeah, like a former professional athlete. Like that's somebody who's like been in his
Yeah,
body a
right.
lot. It's like, what the hell? Like you're gonna give that up?
Yeah, I mean, and he actually won a Super Bowl too. So it's like that's like top tier. So
Wow.
yeah, but he would spend a lot of time in virtual reality. He was in retirement, but still is like I'll listen to some of these stories that he would talk about, like these parties he would go to and people that he would meet. And I'm like, okay, so that brings me to other states of consciousness or whatever, right? Knowing that we're multi-dimensional beings or whatever. And then like in your dream state, like some of these places that you hit. So I'm like wondering, I mean, it's possible, like if some of these places are like crossing frequencies, you know what I mean? Like
Mm,
with the influence, because because like the thing that we know about the subconscious, if you see it or feel it more or less, if you feel the emotion from it, then the subconscious can't distinguish between what's real and what's not real. So if you're sleeping, you're having a nightmare or a good dream or whatever, like you're actually living it at that point. So I'm wondering if some of these spaces kind of like the artificial intelligence is crossing the space of infinite intelligence or attempting to or cause a disruption with that
I
because
think it's
I see that because
blurry.
yeah, because that's a battle for the mind, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
well, are you operating on the side of infinite intelligence, you know what I'm saying, with source and nature and the universe and just intuitively responding to things, or are you geared up like on a high level into artificial intelligence, or just trying to
Yeah.
find your balance in between the two? Uh, so yeah, so it's a lot of that going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it reinforces this whole thing about, with this Pluto return for America. It's like we either get back to old things that work well and like, but innovate, like
Hmm.
do it our own way at the same time, or we go down this road of this like counterfeit reality.
Yes. Yeah, and the thing about it is, like with you bringing up the Tartarian Empire, I think they definitely understood like free energy like nobody's business. Like they like time travel, all of these things. I see being there just from some of the structures that were left behind that were associated with them, and the level of architecture, where I feel like because we're coming into this age of knowing, the individual themselves has the opportunity to go against the grain. And I think, like, they're setting up now to control as much of it as possible, to keep people from becoming free, and really
Mm.
learning the truth. Because it's like, how could we, I'm 40 years old and I didn't really hear anything about the Tartarian Empire until maybe 4 years ago, max, you know what I mean? And it's like, what in the world is this? And how did it all of a sudden pop up now? So I think it's something calling for us to kind of, like I said, with astrology and a lot of these other things, as far as the history, once you really do know the history, like, you can pinpoint what's happened to keep it from happening again and go in another direction. But I think the part that people are going to really struggle with, or see them struggling with, because they've been influenced in so many ways, is with esoteric knowledge, the things that are beyond the norm, and it doesn't even have to have a body, you know what I mean? Yeah, or a physical body, but there are certain energies that have the ability to influence, environments, good, bad, and different, however somebody wants to see that or whatever. But I think that's going to be the real test over the next few years anyway, to really be able to tap into self and listen to yourself, because that was like how I came into a lot of this history, on the history of America's prior to 1492, and the Tartarian Empire. Because, like, first time hearing it, any of it, a lot of times, like when it first started happening to me, it was difficult to swallow because I didn't have anything else to associate it with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's been happening honestly for the last 20 years, like, if I'm really honest. Like, one of the first things I read, I remember in college, was Malcolm X story of the history of the Black man, and he was just talking about science and wars that have been fought, and, like, degrees in between the earth and the moon, and it was just like way over my head, because I
Wow.
had never heard anything about it. But he spoke it with such, passion. Like, it's like, okay, this is not somebody that's, hit me with a bunch of smoke. It's like, there has to be a level of academia behind this, because it aligns a certain way. And just kind of like seeing some of that in the beginning kind of like led me on this journey of, like, really wanting to know, like, okay, what don't I know? And my reason for it is because I feel like it'll help me come into a better understanding of myself, and, like,
Totally.
who we are, in the universe,
Yeah.
versus the story that we get told anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. That, man, that would, well, we're about 2 hours. That'd be a great follow-up video, is like, where'd this story come from? Because there's like,
Yeah,
it's like the chronology was like, it's from like
that's
the
the biggest
Italian
part.
universities and like funded by the big banks. What was it, like Scaligeri or something?
Yes,
It's like
yes.
one of these like aristocrat families. This guy like created the whole thing.
Yeah, and it was a lot of that happening in the 1700s.
Mm,
Even
the
with, like,
Enlightenment.
what's the guy's Sigmund, no, Freud. Yeah, Freud.
Yeah. Oh,
To kind of find out, like, yes, they were in the science, psychologists, but they were more trained in a literary sense. Yeah, they were great writers, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So it's like, yo, who are we listening to? Like, seriously, who are we listening to? But yeah, definitely on follow up, I would definitely want to kind of get more into the whole Tartarian piece.
Yeah.
Just kind of continue to explore some of that.
We get so
Um,
many topics.
yeah,
We should get into
Yeah.
the Jesuits at one point.
Yeah, there's a lot on a lot of that, especially tied to police state when
Yeah,
it comes to the Jesuits,
they taught
like
them everything they knew.
they are the enforcers,
Yeah, yeah. I grew up as Catholic, and it's like, they have confession and all that stuff, and it's like pretty early. I was like, wait, they know everybody's secrets. Like this is like intelligence gathering. And the Jesuits, they run, they run like high schools and colleges. Like I had cousins that went to, those
Yeah,
schools, and it's like they do a good cop, bad cop thing. So it's like if you go to high school and college, it's like 8 years of interrogation. So in high school, they're strict as hell.
a word,
And it's like they're gonna beat your ass. In the old days, they did beat your ass.
right?
Then you go to college and it's like a total changeover, and it's like everything, it's like they'll give you condoms, it's like they'll almost like give you the
Wow.
booze and the drugs, and they're like, yeah, whatever, just have a good time. And it's like I have friends, and like I had a girlfriend that went to Boston College, and it's like
Mhm.
the drugs and the drinking at that school, it's like, oh my God.
I can't believe it.
So there's a joke, like kids who go to Jesuit colleges, like the joke is like, are the Jesuits even Catholic?
Yeah, because
It's
of how
almost,
they operate.
it's like an Aleister Crowley party. It's like everything's permitted. You know what I
That's
mean?
what I'm
Like,
saying, bro. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. And that's what I was kind of saying about King James, like King James was a weird dude, man. It's like stories about like how he didn't like his mother, so he killed her,
right.
yeah.
They're like Roman emperors who did that shit.
Yeah, like he had a thing against women, so it's like that's what I mean about like most people have no idea like where their beliefs stem from and what they're
Yeah.
really fighting about, and that's the sad part,
Yeah.
which we kind of can see a lot of that influencing people like right now, like fighting other people's wars for them or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
totally.
it is what it is. It is what it
Yeah.
is.
So yeah, I mean, this guy looks pretty paranoid for one.
Yeah, he does. Like, can you put him on the big screen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got you.
Can you see him all right?
Yeah, I can see him. He's like on the side of the screen. I can see him. I can see him.
Oh, let me
He has that black hat on.
yeah.
And is that a some form of fez on his head? Does that tassel swing?
I don't know. It almost might be feathers, but I'm not sure.
Feathers.
Because it
Well,
looks
feathers
like,
are significant.
yeah. This thing kind of looks like it's got a little brim on it, but it is round.
Okay, yeah, I
up
see
here.
that. Because that's kind of like like those hats are kind of used in like certain fraternities and lodges too, the
Hmm.
person who like sits in the space of like authority or whatever, they wear the black hat.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it's all kinds of symbolism. And then you see that
Huh.
like that chain that's around his neck or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
you see that in a lot of like
that's
different
Masonic, right?
yeah, definitely. Definitely see that a lot in like a lot of fraternities, a lot of lodges, especially the lodge. And then it's what's that? C and E on his jacket. He has some symbols on there, or is that a moon or something?
I don't
See
know.
a cross, Celtic cross on the bottom
Oh,
right
yeah.
there. And then so he has all that dress on. All
Yeah.
that dress on symbolizing something.
Yeah. It's interesting too. There's this thing in Chinese medicine. Well, it's actually Japanese medicine. It's called senpaku. So it means the three whites. So it's like your iris is supposed to be covered a little bit by your eyelids.
Mm-hmm.
So you only have two whites. You've got white on both sides of the eyelid, on each
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
But he's got some white underneath.
Okay. Yeah. So
It speaks to like, it's people who are like prone to like violent, like people who are prone to like have violence done to them, or like mental imbalance or depression.
Makes sense.
It's like the
Makes
opposite
sense.
for like a Charles Manson. You can see the white like above the iris, and that means like mania.
Got you. Didn't
So
know
this,
that.
This guy's got a below. JFK had a below the eyes. I mean, you know, he was
Yeah.
basically they like your liver regulates your boundaries and your defenses, your psychic
Mm,
defenses.
mm.
So if you can see that white down there, basically means like you're open to
To yeah, you do
like
take to
attack or whatever.
attacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would make sense, wow, that makes so much sense on so many levels, especially when you get into what is it? Centripetal force? Like,
Oh,
that force that kind of like pulls everything to the center.
yeah.
Okay, so like when you kind of get into like biochemistry and spirituality, right? Like thoughts create habits, behaviors, character, that sort of thing. And then on the flip, thoughts create chemicals, whether it's oxytocin, serotonin, or like the stress, hormones or whatever.
Yeah.
And then all that stuff is pumped through the heart or whatever. So then you're gonna have like, because stress builds up in the body or whatever, right? And it kind of like say like the eyes are the windows to the soul. So then you can kind of see like his gates are open. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so who knows what he could be possessed with? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, they say that runs in like families too. And if it runs in elite families, it's like
Mm-hmm.
they're being like intentionally possessed, arguably.
Right. Right.
So
Exactly. And I can see that happening. I can definitely see that happening because it's like some of these things that people have come up with, man, it's not even like humanly possible to come up with some of this craziness, man. Like they had to be influenced by
yeah.
something else,
Yeah.
but they I mean, we do know there's a certain thing such as possession, you know what I mean? Oh,
Mm.
so that's what I was gonna say about that centripetal force or whatever. So it's another state, and I mean they use it in physics, but the state of where someone is like in flow, it's called like negentropy. It's
Mm.
like GENTORPY. So it's like a state of flow. So it talks about being narrow-minded, in a sense of like being able to block out
Oh,
things around us or whatever, to be able to remove ourselves from the stress frequency, the stress awareness.
wow.
So as the more that you can move away from stress awareness, then you can come into, it's easier for you to come into a state of flow. So then you got brain waves, and then your heart waves kind of aligning themselves. And then, okay, so boom, so that's that whole frequency there. Most of the time when it happens to someone, they have like some type of epiphany, because their mind is kind of like in this state where time doesn't exist or whatever. And then they can feel it as well. You know what I mean? So in that alignment, they come into this whole space of negentropy or whatever, to be able to create bliss, or sometimes I guess raise the kundalini, you know what I mean? If they know what they're doing, they gotta be careful with that. Fry them
Yeah.
brain cells for real.
Yeah.
But yeah, so okay, yeah. I mean, I'll go on and on, man. So
Yeah. Well, we'll have
we
plenty to get into.
yeah,
But yeah, thanks a lot for this.
for sure, for sure. Thank you for having me, man. Like I said, I'll be back next week. So I'll reach out to you, see what's going
Oh,
on that
sweet.
end.
So that's
For
soon.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Looking forward
Cool.
to it.
Cool. And
Looking
your Instagram is Lit Strength.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yep, that's the Instagram. And then in the meantime, what I want to do is I'm gonna try to find some of these maps, and I'll send them to you. Maybe we can talk about some of these maps
Oh, hell yeah.
related to some of the things that we had there.
That'd be awesome.
All right, cool, man. Well,
Cool.
hey, look, enjoy the rest of your day. It was like 5:30 there, 5:40.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's like almost midnight here. So
Yeah. It's getting late.
yeah.
Cool. Well, have a good work day tomorrow.
For sure. I know. All right, cool, boss. Well, appreciate you, man.
You too. You too.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
All right, peace.
You too.